He walked into the death pit alone. No backup. No way out. He said no human ever returned. But when he came back, he wasn't alone. He carried her. The queen of a race that once swore to kill every human alive. Her eyes burned like fire. Her smile promised both salvation and destruction, and deep inside the pit. Something followed them back, something far worse than the queen herself, something that should never, ever have been able to leave. The colony of Raven's Edge had seen storms, raids, and the endless cold nights of the frontier, but nothing had ever cast a shadow like the death pit. It was not just a place. It was a curse carved into the planet's skin, a black wound that swallowed everything sent into it. The Drekker used it as their execution ground, tossing in both human prisoners and alien enemies to be torn apart in the dark. Nobody ever came back. Even the bravest soldiers of the Union had tried, armed to the teeth. Wearing the strongest armorand, the death pit ate them alive, leaving nothing behind but echoes of their screams. People stopped trying. People stopped talking about it. The pit became the kind of story parents whispered to scare children, a place so feared it was almost holy in its terror. And yet now, the pit was calling. It began with a signal, faint, broken, but undeniably real. It came from deep within the pit, far past where any human scanner could map. At first, the colony thought it was just interference or some Drekker trap. But when the signal repeated, and when it carried a human voice distorted, but speaking in the old Earth tongue, panic turned to curiosity. Someone was alive down there. Or something wanted them to believe so. Military protocol demanded an investigation, but no squad would take the job. No one wanted to walk into the place that had eaten whole teams in minutes. That was when Captain Reed Kane spoke up. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask for backup. He simply looked at the map, strapped on his gear, and said, "I'll go." The commander tried to talk him out of it. "You know what waits down there?" she warned. "You know you won't come back." Reed just smiled, the kind of tired smile a man wears when he's already made peace with dying. "Then I won't have to worry about tomorrow," he said. And that was that. The next morning, the colony gathered by the iron gate of the death. Pit families stood in silence, some clutching charms, others just staring as if watching a man walk into his grave. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it a smell like rotting metal and burnt bone. Reed checked his rifle one last time, tightened the straps of his armor, and stepped forward. The steel gate groaned as it opened, revealing a yawning tunnel of black dot. The first step in was like crossing into another world. Light seemed to die the moment it touched the stone. The air was heavy, damp, and so cold it felt like it cut through skin. Reed's boots crunched on gravel, but soon that crunch turned to the hollow snap of brittle bones underfoot. Moving, ignoring the prickling sensation that told him he was being watched. The walls were carved with deep groove symbols, maybe, or claw marks. Some were fresh. Somewhere in the dark, water dripped steadily, echoing in slow, deliberate beats. Then there was another sound. Breathing, not his own. Slow, deep, almost like something massive was asleep nearby. He tightened his grip on his rifle, eyes scanning every shadow. Once he thought he saw movement, a flash of pale limbs disappearing into a side tunnel, but when he shone his light, there was nothing. The deeper he went, the more the air seemed to press in on him, until each breath felt like pulling ice into his lungs. Somewhere far ahead, a flicker of light teased him. The signal source or bait? He moved toward it, careful, quiet, every sense screaming that something wasn't right. That was when he heard it, a whisper, faint but clear. His name read. The sound wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human either. It slid into his ears like silk dipped in venom, both beautiful and wrong. He stopped, heart pounding, scanning the darkness. Nothing. The whisper came again, this time closer, and he could feel warm breath on his neck. He spun around, only shadows, shifting as if they didn't belong to anything solid. He forced himself to keep moving, deeper into the twisting tunnels, knowing that turning back now would mean walking with his back to whatever followed him. The light ahead grew brighter, glowing like the reflection of a hidden fire. The walls here were smoother, carved with alien runes that pulsed faintly as he passed. They seemed to watch him, their lines bending almost imperceptibly, as though alive. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern and Red froze. The floor was littered with the skeletal remains of creatures, some human, some far from it. Of the chamber stood something impossible, a structure, like a cage made of black energy, humming with a deep, low vibration. Inside, sitting on one knee, was a figure, tall, red-skinned, horned. Her armor was broken, revealing skin that looked both soft and deadly, her eyes glowing like molten gold in the dim light. She looked up slowly, and for a moment, Reed felt like she was peeling away his thoughts, seeing every weakness, every lie he'd ever told himself. "You shouldn't be here, human," she said, her voice rich and sharp, carrying a strange accent. "You walk in a place where even gods fear to tread." Reed didn't answer right away. He was too busy trying to decide if she was a prisoner or a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. She tilted her head, studying him, turned back. "You still can." But behind her words was something else, something like amusement, or maybe interest. And that was when Reed realized that whatever he had come here for, this was not. The signal, had led him to her. And she was not supposed to be here. Far above, the ground shook with a deep, rumbling roar, and the air grew hotter. Something in the tunnels was waking up, something bigger than both of them. Reed's instincts screamed at him to move, but the golden-eyed woman in the cage didn't flinch. She simply turned her head toward the darkness above, as though listening to the slow, heavy steps drawing closer. The cavern seemed to breathe, the shadows stretching like they were alive. Dust rained down from the high stone ceiling, and the faint hum of the black energy cage grew sharper, almost agitated, as if it too sensed what was coming. Reed's grip tightened on his rifle. He'd been in battles before. He had heard the pounding of war drums, the screaming of dying soldiers, but this sound, this slow, deliberate approach in the pitch black, was worse than any battlefield. It wasn't coming fast. It was coming with patience, the way a predator approaches prey that has nowhere left to run. The red-skinned woman's eyes narrowed. "It knows you are here," she said, her voice low but steady, "and it will not stop." She stepped forward until the energy of the cage brushed against her skin, flickering with sparks. "If you stay, you will be torn apart. If you run, you will be hunted until the pit swallows you." Her lips curved into a faint, almost mocking smile. "But perhaps you already know that." Reed kept his weapon aimed at the shadows above, where a massive shape now shifted in the gloom. "You know a way out?" he asked, his voice sharp, controlled. The queen tilted her head slowly. "I know many ways out, none of which you can reach without me." Before he could answer, the thing in the shadows finally moved into the dim light, and Reed's stomach turned. It was huge, a mass of sinew, in black armor plates, walking on 4 legs that ended in clawed talons the size of swords. Its head was elongated, its mouth lined with teeth that looked like broken glass, each one glistening with saliva. The eyes were pale, almost white. But not blind, they locked onto Reed with chilling precision. The creature exhaled, and the air smelled like blood and rot. It moved with terrible speed for its size, crashing down from the ledge in an explosion of dust and rock. Reed rolled aside as one claw smashed into the stone where he had been standing. Cracking it like glass, he opened fire, the rifle's plasma bolts searing into the creature's hide. But it didn't slow down, it only seemed angrier. The queen watched in silence, her golden eyes following every movement. Reed knew he couldn't win this fight in the open. He ducked under another swipe, moving toward the cage. "Tell me how to open it," he shouted. The queen's smile deepened, a glint of challenge in her eyes. "Break the anchors, 4 of them, but each is guarded." The beast lunged again, and Reed dove toward the nearest anchor, an obsidian-like crystal, embedded in the ground, humming with the same energy as the cage. He slammed the butt of his rifle into it, then fired point blank. The crystal shattered with a deafening crack, and the cage flared violently, its energy lines flickering. The creature roared, as though the destruction of the anchor had enraged it further. 2 more strikes nearly ended him. One claw grazed his shoulder. tearing through armor and skin, blood hot against the cold air. Reed gritted his teeth, forcing himself toward the next anchor. The Queen's voice cut through the chaos. Faster, human, or you die here. The second anchor was harder, thick armor plating covered it, forcing Reed to use an explosive charge from his belt. Now the blast lit the cavern in blinding white for an instant, and the cage's hum became a scream of energy. The Queen stepped closer to the edge, her gaze fixed on him like a hawk. The beast seemed to realize what he was doing now. It moved between him and the last two anchors, its claws dragging sparks from the stone floor. Reed's chest burned from exhaustion, his shoulder ached, and every breath tasted of dust and copper. But he didn't stop. He feinted left, rolled right, and slid under the creature's torso, planting another charge at the third anchor. The explosion rocked the cavern, throwing both Reed and the beast to the ground. The Queen's voice rose above the echoing blast. One more human. Reed staggered to his feet. The final anchor only meters away, but the creature was already there, its massive frame blocking the path. It lowered its head, its jaws spreading wide enough to swallow him whole. For a second, Reed felt the weight of every bad decision that had brought him here. And then he moved. He sprinted straight toward the beast, sliding under it, snapping jaws, firing upward into its throat as he passed. Ow! The plasma bolts burned deep, and the creature recoiled in pain just long enough for him to throw his last charge at the final anchor. The blast was deafening. Shards of black crystal rained down like hail, and the cage erupted in a blinding storm of light. When the glare faded, the Queen was free. She stepped out slowly, every movement deliberate, like a predator tasting freedom. After a long captivity, her eyes found Reed bleeding, panting, barely standing, and her smile turned sharper. "You're not like the others," she said softly. "Maybe you're worth keeping alive."
Right.
Behind them, the creature let out one last earth-shaking roar and began to rise again. Reed barely had time to reload before the massive beast lunged again, its claws gouging deep trenches into the stone floor. The cavern shuddered with each impact, dust and shards of rock raining from above. But this time, he wasn't alone. Queen moved with lethal grace, a blur of crimson and steel, her broken armor doing nothing to hide the deadly precision in her movements. In one hand she held a blade unlike anything Reed had seen, dark metal that seemed to drink in the light, its edges humming with alien energy. She met the beast's charge head-on, sliding under its swinging talons and slashing deep into the softer flesh under its armored plates. The creature howled, a sound that made the very walls tremble, but the Queen was already moving again, her golden eyes glowing brighter with the thrill of battle. Reed tried to cover her with bursts from his rifle, aiming for the gaps she opened in the creature's armor. Plasma bolts seared into exposed muscle, drawing more enraged roars, but the thing refused to slow. It was built to kill in the dark, built to survive wounds that would have dropped a human or even a Drekker in seconds. The Queen leapt too, higher ground, flipping onto a jagged ledge, and called down to him. Its heart is behind the third plate on its chest. "Burn through it and it will fall." Reed didn't question her. He didn't have time to wonder why she was helping him at all. He waited for her next attack, knowing she was trying to draw the beast's attention away. When it reared back to swipe at her, exposing its underside for a fraction of a second, Reed sprinted forward. His boots slipped on blood and bone, but he kept going, skidding to his knees just as the third plate came into view. He fired everything he had left into it, the plasma bolts heating the metal until it glowed white-hot. The beast screamed, twisting violently, but the Queen was already dropping from above, driving her blade straight through the softened plate and into the creature's heart. For a moment, the beast went still, its massive frame shuddering once, twice, and then collapsing with a final bone-shaking thud. The air was suddenly heavy with the smell of scorched flesh and alien blood. Reed staggered back, wiping sweat and grit from his face. His armor was torn, his body aching from the constant strain. He glanced at the Queen, who stood over the dead beast, breathing hard, but looking entirely in control. Her blade dripping with black eye, she turned to him, stepping closer until they were only a few feet apart. You fought well. For a human, she said, her tone halfway between a compliment and a taunt. Most of your kind scream and run when they see one of these. You didn't. Reed met her gaze, unflinching. Screaming wouldn't have helped. Her smile curved in a way that was almost dangerous. No. But still, you came here for something. You didn't risk your life just to die in my company. She began walking toward one of the shadowed tunnels branching off from the cavern, not looking back to see if he followed. Come. If you want to live, you will walk with me. I know the paths of the pit. Alone you will last minutes. With me, you may last hours. Perhaps more. Reed hesitated only for a moment before moving. After her, the tunnels ahead were narrower. The walls slick with some kind of oily substance that reflected their torchlight in unsettling shapes. The air grew thicker, heavier, as if they were descending deeper into something alive. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, clattering claws, low growls, and the occasional sharp, almost human scream that made the skin on the back of Reed's neck crawl. The queen moved like she belonged here, her steps silent, her head tilting occasionally as if listening to voices Reed couldn't hear. She spoke without turning. The Drekker built this pit to break us, my people, your people. All enemies fed to its hunger. But they do not understand what they have awakened here. There are things in these depths older than the Drekker, older than my race, things that cannot be controlled. Reed kept his rifle ready, his eyes scanning every shadow. Then why are you still alive? Her laughter was low and smooth. Because I am harder to kill than they think. They passed through a chamber where the walls were lined with enormous alien skulls, each one mounted like a trophy. Some were humanoid, others were nothing Reed recognized. At the far end, a pool of dark water rippled despite the still air. And for a moment, Reed swore he saw something move beneath the surface, something long, pale, and eyeless. The queen didn't pause, simply brushing her fingers against the wall as they moved on. Finally, they reached a point where the tunnel split into 3 separate paths. The queen stopped, turning to face him. Her eyes seemed to burn even brighter. In the darkness, one path will take us closer to the surface. One will take us deeper into the pit, and one will take us somewhere you will wish you had never gone. Reed adjusted his grip on his rifle, meeting her gaze. Which one do we take? Her smile widened, revealing just enough teeth to make it unclear whether she was amused or warning him. That human depends on how much you want to know the truth. Before he could answer, a deep, distant roar rolled through the tunnels, coming from the direction of the truth path, and it was getting closer. The roar came again, this time closer, shaking loose pebbles from the tunnel walls and sending faint ripples through the oily black film that clung to the stone. The queen's expression didn't change, but Reed noticed the way her hand tightened on her blade, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. She was measuring something, not fear, but anticipation. That sound, she said softly, is not Drekker. That is something older, something the Drekker feared awake. Reed glanced down each of the 3 paths, his gut instinct telling him that whatever was in the truth tunnel wasn't just dangerous, it was lethal. The queen seemed to read his hesitation. The path to the surface will not be easy, she said, her tone smooth, almost coaxing. But it is possible. Path deeper leads to secrets the Drekker guard with blood and steel. And the path you fear? That one holds the reason I am here? It's the reason this pit exists? Her words were a trap and an invitation all at once. Reed wasn't stupid. He knew she was holding back more than she was telling. But every instinct screamed. That turning away now would mean walking blind into more traps. Show me, he said. Her smile was slow, dangerous. As you wish. She turned toward the truth tunnel and began walking, her steps silent despite the crunch of bone fragments scattered along the floor. Reed followed, keeping his rifle raised. The air grew warmer as they went, the walls narrowing until his shoulders brushed the slick, run-carved stone. The runes glowed faintly now, their light pulsing like a heartbeat. And the deeper they went, the faster the pulse became. After several minutes, the tunnel widened into a massive chamber. The ceiling was lost in darkness, but the floor was dominated by a circular pit within the pita-deep shaft surrounded by stone pillars carved into grotesque shapes. Between the pillars, black chains stretched downward into the darkness below, each one as thick as a man's torso. The queen stepped to the edge, her gaze fixed on the black void at the center. "This," she said quietly, "is where they keep it." Reed scanned the shadows. "Keep what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she crouched, placing a hand against the stone floor. "Do you feel it?" At first he felt nothing, just the faint tremor of the ground beneath him. Grew. A slow, steady vibration, like the distant rhythm of some enormous heartbeat. The chains rattled faintly, the sound echoing up from the darkness. Something was moving below, something big enough to make the entire chamber breathe with it. Finally, the queen spoke. "Before the Drekker ruled this world, before my people even walked it, there was a war here. It's not between nations, but between gods. One of them was cast down into the earth, bound in chains forged from the bones of its own kind. The Drekker built this pit to feed it, to keep it asleep with blood and fear." Her golden eyes shifted to him, sharp as a blade. "The problem is, it is waking." Reed felt the tremor grow stronger under his boots. "Then we leave." Queen's smile was cold. "Leave, human. If it wakes, there will be no place to leave to. Not for you, not for me, not for your colony above." She stood, turning toward the nearest chain. "There is one way to stop it before it rises. But it requires something the Drekker would never give Freya key of living flesh. One born beyond this world, one who is not bound by its oaths." She took a slow step toward him. "You, Captain Reed Kane." He kept his rifle steady, unsure whether to laugh or pull the trigger. "You dragged me here for this?" "I didn't drag you," she said, her tone like silk over steel. "The pit brought you. It chooses who enters. I am merely helping it choose who leaves." Before he could speak again, a sharp cracking sound rang out from the depths. One of the massive chains twitched violently, scattering dust from the pillars. The tremor became a rumble, shaking the entire chamber. From below, a single, long breath rolled upward, wet and heavy. Carrying the smell of rotten salt, the queen's voice dropped to a near whisper. "It's listening to us." Reed's finger hovered near the trigger. "Then we should go before it." A voice deep and layered like the grinding of stone rose from the pit. It was speaking in a language Reed didn't know, yet somehow understood. It spoke his name. The queen's smile returned, sharper than ever. "Now it knows you." The chains jerked again, harder this time. And something vast shifted in the darkness below, a glint of scale, shape too massive to see in full, moving with slow, deliberate force. The pillars groaned under the strain, and a wave of heat rolled. Out of the pit the queen turned, toward him, her voice almost playful despite the quake under their feet. "We can run, human. Or we can end this. But if we run, it will come for you first." Before Reed could answer, the chain nearest to them snapped with a deafening crack. Sound didn't echo it, seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. And then something began to climb. The sound of the chain snapping was like the world's spine breaking sharp, final, and wrong. Dust poured from the ceiling in choking clouds, the air itself trembling as if the pit was alive and in pain. Reed's instincts screamed at him to run, but the queen didn't move. She stood at the edge of the yawning black shaft, her eyes fixed on the darkness below with the same calm intensity as a predator. Watching prey step into striking distance, the remaining chains groaned under immense strain, each one shuddering, in rhythm with the slow, deliberate movement coming up from the depths. Then he saw it just for a second. In the shifting gloom, a vast curve of scaled flesh, dark and wet, glinting faintly in the pulsing light from the runes. It was big, impossibly big. Even the beast they had killed earlier was a child compared to this thing. The surface of its scales shimmered faintly, not with light, but with heat, waves of it rolling upward to prick at Reed's skin. The stench that followed was worse than rot. Worse than the burned metal smell of Drekker tech. It was ancient, like a tomb that had been sealed for centuries, cracking open at last. The queen finally moved, her voice low but urgent. "We don't have time. Once a chain breaks, the others will follow. If it rises, the pit will not hold it. Nothing will." Reed kept his rifle aimed at the shaft, though the rational part of him knew it was pointless. Exactly. "Is your plan?" She glanced at him, a dangerous smile on her lips. "We kill it before it kills us." He stared at her like she'd just told him to fight a mountain with a knife. "Kill it. Look at the size of it." Her eyes burned gold in the half-light. "Size means nothing if you strike at the right place." She stepped toward one of the stone pillars, running her hand across the carved runes. The symbols flared with sudden light, and the pillar shuddered. From within, a section of the stone split open to reveal a rack of weapons blades. Spears and curved hooks of strange, dark metal. Each one seemed alive, humming faintly, their edges shimmering like heat haze. She selected a spear, spinning it once with fluid grace. These were made for one purpose-ending gods. The Drekker cannot wield them. Humans can. She held it out to him. "Take it." Reed hesitated, staring at the weapon. It was heavier than it looked, the grip rough, like holding on to bone. The hum of it crawled up his arm, settling in his chest. It felt wrong and powerful. "Happens if I use this?" Her smile widened. "You either save your world or you die screaming. The outcome depends on you." Another chain snapped, the deafening crack followed by a deep, grinding roar from below. The entire chamber shook violently now, cracks spiderwebbing across the floor. The queen didn't flinch. She was already moving toward the edge, her blade. In one hand, her body balanced with the ease of someone who had fought and survived in places like this before. Reed followed reluctantly, the spear in his grip vibrating harder as they neared the pit. Then, with a sudden rush of heat and sound, it emerged. At first, it was only an eye massive, size of a dropship hatch blinking open in the darkness. Its surface was a deep shifting amber, slit-pupiled and rimmed with jagged ridges of scarred flesh. The pupil tightened sharply when it saw them. And the sound it made was not just a roar, it was a wordless, furious recognition. The queen's voice was barely audible over the rumble. "It knows you now. It will never forget you." The rest of it came into view, rows of armored plates sliding past one another like grinding tectonic plates, each one marked with scars and old battle burns. It was climbing fast now, using clawed limbs that were as thick as the stone pillars themselves. The air became suffocatingly hot, every breath a struggle. Reed's pulse hammered in his ears. He looked at the queen. "Tell me where to strike." Her answer came with a strange, sharp thrill in her voice. "Its heart lies in its mouth, human. You must make it open wide enough to take you in." For a moment he thought she was joking. But there was no humor in her eyes, only fire and certainty. The creature's head broke the surface of the pit, its jaws splitting into three massive, overlapping sections lined with fangs the size of swords. The heat pouring from its mouth was unbearable, waves of it hitting like blasts from an engine core. The queen raised her blade, her voice carrying over the roar. "We strike together. If we miss." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Another chain gave way. The remaining one snapped almost instantly after, the sound like a dozen lightning strikes at once. The pit was free now. The thing within it surged upward, massive claws gripping the rim, the ground trembling under its weight. Reed tightened his grip on the spear. The queen stood beside him, deadly calm. And then the creature lunged. The world became nothing but motion. And heat. The creature's lunge sent a shockwave through the chamber. The impact of its body hitting the rim of the inner pit, shaking the ground so hard, Reed almost lost his footing. Its three-section jaws opened wide, and the stench that hit him was a blast of pure rot and fire, the breath of something that had eaten gods and remembered their taste. The queen moved first. She was already airborne, vaulting off a pillar with inhuman grace, blade glinting as she aimed for the softer flesh at the edge of the beast's mouth. The monster roared, snapping at her, but she was too quick. Her strike cut deep, dark blood spraying across the stone, sizzling where it landed. The wound made the thing recoil just enough for Reed to move in. He ran forward, every step pounding in his ears, the spear humming violently in his hands. The queen's earlier words echoed in his mind. You must make it open wide enough to take you in. Insanity, he thought. Absolute insanity. Then he did it anyway. The creature came back around, jaws stretching impossibly wide as it roared at him.
Oh.
Reed didn't hesitate. He threw himself forward, sliding under one of the massive lower fangs, and jammed the spear upward into the softer, pale tissue inside its maw. The weapon's hum became a scream as alien energy flared along its shaft, the point driving deep. The beast thrashed violently, almost biting down on him before the queen leapt onto its snout, forcing its jaws apart with both hands and her braced legs. Now human. She shouted, her voice raw with effort. Reed gritted his teeth and drove, the spear in deeper. The sound that followed wasn't a roar, it was a scream, deep and earth-shaking, so loud it made the air vibrate. The heat from its mouth turned into a rush of blistering wind, and suddenly the spear exploded with light. A shockwave of force blasted outward, hurling Reed across the chamber. He slammed into the base of a pillar, pain ripping through his back, but he kept his eyes open, refusing to black out. The creature's head thrashed wildly now, smashing into the stone walls, knocking down chunks the size of drop pods. The queen was still on it, her blade driving in again and again, every strike finding new weaknesses in its armor. With each blow, the monster's movements slowed, its massive limbs trembling. Black smoke poured from its mouth and the runes. Along the walls flickered violently as if the pit itself was rejecting the thing. Reed forced himself up, ignoring the pain in his ribs. He could see it weakening, but not enough. Not yet. The spear still pulsed faintly in his grip, as if calling for one last strike. Summoning what strength he had left, he ran toward the beast again, leaped onto the curve of its lower jaw, and used its fangs as steps to climb higher. The queen glanced at him only once, her golden eyes burning with the same fire he felt in his chest. She didn't say a word, but she didn't need to. Together, they struck. Her blade pierced through the upper skull plate as his spear drove, through the back of the throat into whatever ancient organ served as its heart. The combined force lit the entire chamber in blinding light, the runes blazing white. The creature gave one last, horrific shudder, and collapsed backward into the pit. The crash was like an earthquake, dust and stone raining from above. For a long moment there was nothing but silence, true silence, the kind that follows when something monstrous finally dies. Reed stood there, chest heaving, covered in blood and soot, the spear's glow fading in his hands. The queen dropped to the floor beside him, landing as lightly as if she'd stepped off a stair. Her armor was in tatters, her skin streaked with blood, some hers, most not. She looked at him for a long time, head tilted, and then allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "You did not scream," she said. "I like that." Before Reed could answer, the chamber gave another low groan. The pit wasn't shaking anymore, but something else was. Cracks spread through the walls, and streams of black water began seeping through. The queen's eyes flicked toward the nearest tunnel. "We have to go, now." They ran the fading light from the runes, casting long shadows behind them. As they reached the tunnel mouth, Reed glanced back just once. The creature's corpse was already sinking into the darkness, the chains hanging loose and broken above it. But deep in the black water filling the pit, he thought he saw movement, something small, but many, and they were climbing. The tunnel shook with each step they took, dust sifting down from the ceiling in steady streams. The ground vibrating like something vast and restless was moving far below. The queen led the way, her long strides purposeful, her blade still slick with the black blood of the creature they'd slain. Reed followed close, the alien spear heavy in his grip, the hum of its strange energy growing fainter with every passing second, as if whatever had powered it was now gone, spent in the killing blow. They turned a corner into a wide passage where the air was thicker, almost liquid, and the walls dripped with slow, steady rivulets of black water. The queen didn't slow, but her eyes narrowed slightly, scanning every shadow. "The pit is angry," she said, her voice low. "We woke it more than we killed it, and now the others are coming." Reed glanced over his shoulder, and his stomach tightened. Shapes were moving in the gloom behind them, long, sinuous. Things crawling across the walls and ceiling, their bodies segmented like insects, but ending in talons and snapping lamprey-like mouths. They moved without sound, only the faint wet scrape of their claws against the stone betraying their presence. "Many?" he asked. "Enough to strip us to bone before we reach the surface," she answered, without looking back. They broke into a run. The Queen's pace never faltered, even when the tunnel narrowed and jagged stone tore at their armor. Reed kept his, rifle ready in one hand, the spear in the other, firing short, controlled bursts at the creatures gaining on them. Each shot burned through pale, slick skin, but more always came, their eyeless faces turning toward the light like moths to flame. Tunnel curved upward, a faint breath of cooler air hinting at an exit ahead. But as they neared a bend, the Queen slowed, raising a hand for silence. From around the corner came a low, rhythmic sound, heavy boots striking stone. Not the insect things. This was something else. She slid forward silently and peered around. The bend. A Drekker warband blocked the passage, 6 towering figures in black armor, their long, reptilian faces partly hidden by bone-like helmets. Each carried a jagged spear crackling with electric charge. They were searching for something, or someone they know. "I'm free," the Queen murmured, "and they will not let us pass alive." Reed's pulse spiked. "Can we go around? There's no other way." She turned to him, her expression sharp. "If we fight, we fight. Together, do not let them separate us." The decision was made for them when one of the Drekker caught their scent. It hissed a deep vibrating sound that made Reed's teeth acand. The others turned, forming a half-circle to block the tunnel. The lead warrior barked something in their guttural language, leveling its spear at the Queen. Her reply was not in words, but in action. She moved like lightning, her own blade flashing upward to slice through the Drekker's weapon shaft. Following the motion with a strike that split its chest armor, Reed didn't wait. He opened fire, the first plasma burst hitting one in the neck, throat dropping it instantly. The narrow tunnel became chaos, the air filled with roars, gunfire, and the electric crackle of Drekker weapons. One lunged at Reed, its spear grazing his side with a burst of searing pain. He countered by driving the alien spear through its abdomen, the strange weapon piercing armor like paper. The hum of the spear flared for a moment, the Drekker's body twitching violently before collapsing. The Queen fought with terrifying precision, every movement efficient and lethal. She didn't just kill, she dismantled, cutting tendons, breaking weapons, leaving her enemies bleeding and screaming before finishing them. But the Drekker were relentless, and more appeared from deeper in the tunnel. Reed's rifle overheated, forcing him to drop it and grip the spear with both hands. They fought back to back now, their strikes perfectly timed, each covering the other's blind spots. Reed felt the strange rhythm of her fighting pulling him in, guiding his own movements until it was as if they had trained together for years. When the last Drekker fell, the tunnel floor was slick with blood, both red and black. Ow. Reed leaned against the wall, catching his breath, his armor scorched and torn. The Queen wiped her blade on a fallen warrior's cloak and looked at him with something that might have been approval. "You fight better when you stop thinking," she said before Reed could respond. A new sound reached them from behind the skittering scrape of claws on stone, dozens of them growing louder. The Queen's gaze shifted to the faint light ahead. "We are almost there. But if those things catch us in the open..." They didn't finish the thought. They just ran, sprinting toward the growing light. The tunnel narrowed one last time before exploding into an open ledge high above a canyon floor. Cool air hit Reed's face. But so did reality. The only way forward was a narrow stone bridge spanning the canyon and beyond it, the faint shimmer of the colony's outer gate. Behind them, the skittering grew into a chorus. The Queen met Reed's eyes. "We cross together, if one of us falls." He nodded, gripping the spear tight. Then the other keeps going. And then they stepped onto the bridge, with the swarm pouring into the tunnel behind them. The bridge groaned under their boots, ancient stone crumbling at the edges. Each step sending pebbles tumbling into the endless black of the canyon below. The wind here was sharp and cold, cutting through the heat of battle still clinging to their skin. Reed kept his eyes forward, refusing to look down. The queen moved ahead of him, her long braid whipping in the wind, her blade angled low at her side. Behind them, the swarms spilled out of the tunnel, hundreds of the insect things, crawling over each other in a writhing tide of claws and snapping jaws. Their eyeless faces turned toward the bridge, and without hesitation, they began pouring across, their movements unnervingly fast for creatures with so many limbs. Halfway across, first of them leaped, sailing through the air toward Reed. He turned, driving the alien spear upward into its body, feeling the blade punch through chitin and flesh. The thing shrieked a high, piercing sound and slid off the weapon, falling into the canyon.
Ow.
But three more took its place. The queen spun, her blade flashing in the dim light, severing limbs and sending bodies tumbling into the abyss. But for every one they killed, more came, scuttling onto the bridge from all sides, their claws scraping against the stone like nails on glass. Reed's boot caught on a crack, almost sending him sprawling. The queen caught his arm, yanking him upright without missing a beat in her strikes. "Do not stop moving," she barked. "If we slow, they will drag us over." The far end of the bridge was close now, just 30 steps. But the swarm was closing in from both sides, some dropping from the canyon walls to land ahead of them. One of the larger ones, its body thick with armored plating, planted itself directly in their path, its head lowering as it hissed. The queen didn't hesitate. She charged, slamming her shoulder into it with such force that it staggered back. Reed darted past her, plunging the spear into the soft flesh at its neck joint. The hum of the weapon flared again, the creature's body convulsing before collapsing sideways, blocking part of the bridge. They climbed over it, boots slipping on the slick black blood coating the stone. The gate was visible now, shimmering blue wall of energy anchored between two towers. But something was wrong. The hum of the barrier was weak, flickering like a candle about to go out. "They have damaged it," the queen growled. "If it falls before we pass," she didn't finish.
No.
She didn't need to. Reed knew the swarm would pour through and reach the colony. The last stretch of the bridge became a sprint. The swarm was so close now that Reed could feel the air moving from their lunges, the scrape of claws inches behind him. The queen was ahead, her free hand outstretched toward the gate controls. Then the bridge shuddered violently. Something massive had struck it from Balokrax, spider-webbed through the stone, chunks falling into the abyss. Reed stumbled, but kept moving, his lungs burning. The queen reached the control panel, her fingers flying across alien runes. The gate flared brighter, but not enough. "They drained its core," she said, voice tight. "I need the spear," without hesitation. Reed threw it to her. She caught it midair, slammed the tip into the gate's energy anchor, and the weapon's hum erupted into a roar. Light flared across the bridge, washing over them in a wave of blue heat. The swarm screeched as the energy hit them, the creatures igniting into bursts of white flame. One by one, they fell, tumbling into the canyon or crumbling to ashware. They stood. The bridge stopped shaking. The only sound left was the hiss of the barrier stabilizing. The queen stepped through first, her silhouette framed by the glowing blue wall. Reed followed, the heat fading as the gate sealed shut behind them. On the other side, the wind was quieter, the air cleaner. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the queen turned to him, the faintest hint of a smirk on her lips. "You have survived. More than most of my warriors," she said. "Now, you have earned a place at my side." Reed raised an eyebrow. "As what?" "An ally." Her smirk deepened. "Now." But before he could answer, a deep rumble rolled through the ground beneath them. The queen's gaze shifted back toward the canyon, where the faintest shadow moved. In the depths beyond the gates, something larger than the creature in the pit. Something still waiting. And Reed understood in that moment. The death pit had only been the beginning.